Welcome to BABH 9804, Module 2, Lesson 1, all on the vulnerability analysis. This is a simple summary of the critical material in the assigned readings. It is not a replacement to the readings. Details of materials is found in the readings and should be reviewed for a complete understanding. Consider this is the first meeting of a chosen few. You are all managers, and the owner has decided that the company needs to be better prepared for possible crises, other than just fire. How do you approach such a vague and serious project? Questions are aplenty. What situation or event can cause a crisis? What areas of the business are critically affected? What is the probability of occurrence for each type of cause? How do you prevent or mitigate effects of a crisis? Who are the internal and external parties? What has to be done to recover from the crisis? How soon will we recover? How much will this cost? Will paying for this cost more than the crisis? Until someone suggests that we have or need a process. First, we have to decide the most critical type of crisis that we must spend our resources on at this time. Now we decide on the objectives that the plan must accomplish. And then we're going to have to carry on the development of a plan to ensure all elements are considered. Crisis management for this course will have three basic elements: the vulnerability analysis, the impact analysis, and the crisis plan. The vulnerability analysis will help you decide which crisis should take the priority with the limited resources that you might have. The impact analysis will determine the process needed to recover. It'll define the objectives for the entire process and identify the changes because it'll become an annual operation. And the crisis plan will tell you what to do before, during, and after the crisis. The objective of the crisis management process is to determine what situation should be planned for. Well, consider you've got floods and snow and hurricanes and frauds and cyber attacks. Which one are you going to have to do? What processes are critically affected? What is the most likely and has the greatest impact in the elements of your business operation? Priorities and resources needed to restart. What do we need to mitigate, recover, and restart the entire operation? Will it be possible to restart? We're going to have to set objectives for the recovery. These are all concepts within the crisis management process. What is needed for the success? First of all, we need corporate support with time, resources, and budget. We're going to have to put together a very knowledgeable project team from all of the business processes, all of the different operations within the business. We need a complete organizational understanding of what is going on in this company. We're going to have to plan for a completion date objective, and we're going to have a budget that will allow us to succeed. The team is critical to this whole operation. The team must be multidisciplinary from all areas of the organization, not just one person and an mid assistance from HR. All departments must be involved. You need internal and external expertise, people that know. The team should include external partners that are only focused on external effects of the situation, such as the fire department, police, EMC, and hospitals. Recognize that the team will have members that are biased, but all results are going to be averaged, thereby reducing the effect of any outliers of opinions. There are two must-readings on vulnerability analysis. One is titled How to Develop and Use Your Facility's Hazard Vulnerability Assessment by Philip Meir. And the second one is a FEMA publication, Emergency Management Guide for Business and Industry. Both of these are available in the assigned reading areas. Vulnerability analysis is really going to be simply the prelude to a business impact analysis, and of course the eventual evolution of the business contingency plan. It identifies the threats that are possible and assigns a risk, or rather a probability, to allow the prioritizing of resources. So we're going to be able to pick the areas or the situations that are going to be most critical, and we will be able to assign the proper resources to. It identifies the impact of each of these threats and identifies the capacity of the organization to be able to manage it. And therefore, at the end of the vulnerability analysis, we'll assign a priority to that threat. So as a sort of an overview, we're really looking at how to be able to assess the individual project, the situations, how to evaluate those situations in terms of our resources and the impact it will have, and how to rank those situations so that we can have our resources most effectively and efficiently work on the following business plans for them. An assessment is a review of the business processes, internal and external response plans, and a response capabilities, including an insurance review. Of course, you need insurance. Insurance is going to be sort of a financial response to the crisis. Okay, you're going to list and evaluate each possible type of emergency according to its probability, its impact, and your capacity to be able to respond. Therefore, you're going to have a ranking for each possible type of emergency. In its simplest form, this is one that's presented by FEMA. It's a very subjective survey. Well, all vulnerability assessments are going to be a subjective survey at this point. Recognize what you're going to be able to do. An example could be a convention hotel in London, Ontario. And we're going to list down the left-hand column all the possible occurring emergencies that could happen. Now remember, this is London, Ontario, not England. So ice storms would probably not have a high probability in London, England. But yeah, they're going to happen in London, Ontario. And of course, what you're going to do is assign for the different categories in the columns going along the horizontal, a rating, and a very subjective rating at that, as to what each member of the team is going to value in terms of its probability of occurrence, what they might feel is going to be the human impact, the property impact, and the business impact for that particular situation of an ice storm. And of course, adding to that, the internal resources and the external resources that are capable for managing these types of emergencies. So, in the first one, a probability. 5 is high, 1 is low. I selected 4. After all, it is London, Ontario, and will there be an ice storm? Yeah, more than likely sometime during the winter. What will be its impact? Are there going to be people dying from the impact of this ice storm? Probably not. The property impact? Probably very little. But the business impact is going to have some form of higher impact. You're going to see people that are going to be canceling because they can't arrive. That might be offset by people that are staying longer because they can't leave. But you'll see on the convention side of things, a complete maybe elimination of the project. So I've set that higher. How are we really going to respond to any of these on an internal basis? Well, a weak response would be 5, and a strong response, okay, and it would be 1. I would say for an ice storm, the hotel might evaluate that as a fairly strong response because we have the capacity to house people, to feed people for a short period of time, and to be able to really overcome the odds that are going to appear because of the ice storm. As far as the external results, the biggest fear might be having, let's say, power turned off. So the external resources might be a huge problem. Now, the end result for all this will be the addition of everything. I'm simply going to take everything added up, it's 15.5, dividing by the total possible, which is 5, 4, 6 categories, 30, and getting a 52%. So I'm looking at the risk of this as being in the area of 52%. Not a high risk, but certainly not the lowest you're going to find. Okay, and you can use that 52% to compare that to other disasters which might be considered in the vulnerability analysis. This is another example, this one given by Nimir in his article. I sort of like this one. It does show, and you can witness in a lot of cases here the situations of the different types of events. It has a score here. Well, it goes through the probability, the impacts. It has an added column that says the preparation. Are you prepared for this? And it's just a different sort of classification that I thought was more valuable. And looking at again the internal and external responses. But the scale on this is 1 to 3. It's still very subjective, but is it critical to have the values 1 to 5, or should it be 1 to 10? And I'm not really too worried about that. We're talking to Heather about it, and she says yes, 3 is a limiting. However, she feels that because there are multiple categories of assessments and an overall score, it's still valuable in its current form. She would wonder if it were a scale of 5, if it would become too much of an onerous task to complete the document with the standpoint of the officials completing the scale. Okay. Would a respondent be able to answer the scoring if it was increased? A more specific scale might go too far the other way. And, you know, you're going to read like low, almost low, barely low, almost moderate, approaching moderate, moderate. So if you had 10 different categories, maybe it's not going to be as effective. This one I like. It keeps it simple, but it still is inclusive. And again, at the end, what it's going to do is it's going to give you that overall risk in terms of what each one of those categories of events are going to be. The preceding analysis it resolves in 2 areas that I think are fairly interesting. It'll give you for each event a sort of evaluation of what the risk is going to be, in other words, the probability, and the level of impact that will happen for each event. So if you have a high risk and a high impact, it suggests to you that you need a business impact analysis and a business continuity plan to go with it. Lower risks are going to probably, it could be left to later on to be able to do that when your resources are available. At the same time, you might be able to couple with other business contingency plans, i.e. the element of a fire plan could be associated with evacuation needed for pool chlorine hazards, this type of thing. In any event, those vulnerability analysis should be an annual exercise to determine whether there are any changes or not. Critically important. There's another means of comparing the risk involved in terms of a specific event. It really is a plotting of both probability and impact, and I'll show you that shortly. But think of it this way. If you look at risk as being the product of probability and impact, or likelihood times impact, that one figure will give you a valuation of a risk. In other words, if there's a high probability and a high impact, your risk will be much higher than it would be if you had a low probability and a lower impact. Okay, but how do you rank risks? And that's what this plotting is going to allow you to do. Recognize that a risk can be high if there is a high impact but a low likelihood. An example of this would be an earthquake. You're more likely to have a business contingency plan for an earthquake in Vancouver or Los Angeles than you would have here in Niagara. If a situation evolves such as the risk can be high if it has a low impact but a high likelihood. And what are we talking about? Well, it might be a fire or something like this. There's a lot of situations that this could happen to. But what I want you to do is recognize that there is still an eventual higher risk, even though the impact might be lower. Okay, so look at what they've done in this chart. Presented here is a chart to compare the risks of events. Simply a plot of impact versus probability. The horizontal is impact. The vertical is going to be the likelihood or probability. After the vulnerability analysis, you know a value of the probability, and you can average the level of impact in all categories. So I would then go in simply on the x-axis compared to the y-axis, compare the value of the impact versus the likelihood or probability. And it will fall somewhere in one of these many squares, 25 squares. So that point, recognizing that things with lower probabilities and lower impacts aren't going to be as high risk. Notice how you can still have in square number 6 a moderately high impact, but with a low probability. Okay, so the real results of this comes out in the final analysis where they categorize each of those squares, and it happens to be where the end plotting of your events go. So low is green, it's anything under a 5. Okay, medium is greater than 5 but less than 12. And of course, high is going to be red. So all high-level risks should be mitigated before the medium or low-level risks. Once all high-level risks have been mitigated, additional risks can be taken care of based on your schedule, funds, and ability to mitigate to the medium risk. So it takes the results of the vulnerability analysis and allows you to be able to get an idea of what sort of further actions you're going to be able to take. So an overview. Tools presented here are subjective. This being the case, the tools are really a means to create an educated guess. The priority to create a business contingency plan might be heavily weighed on resources and legal requirements. So yes, it's all a guess, but at least you're being able to evaluate the situation, look at the risks and impacts, and decide which ones should be better to be able to work with. The risk or vulnerability assessments simply helps to understand and prioritize the processes that will require a detailed impact analysis and leading to the business contingency plan. Thanks very much.